This is SaugaTalks. Today I'm Irene, the host, and I speak weekly with fascinating people in tech. And we touch on artificial intelligence, we touch on innovation, we touched on digital transformation across industries, and sometimes going deeper into healthcare, going deeper into HR and other verticals. But today I'm incredibly privileged because we not only talk about robotics, the age of useful robotics, but my incredible guest is here, Tony Ellis. Hello, Tony. How are you?
Hello, Irene. I'm fine, thank you, and it's great to be talking to you. Absolutely great.
How lovely. Absolutely. Tony, you're an inventor, you're a roboticist, and
Yes,
you're a futurist. So I cannot wait to hear from you because robotics right now, it making headlines.
yes,
Okay, we all seem to be interested, right, to know what
yes.
the future, what the future ahead of us. Could you please describe, in your experience, robotics evolution, and where do you think we are in that cycle?
Yes, right. Robotics. I mean, I've been making robots for over 45 years now, and actually, robotics steered my entire career because that you need so many different skills to be a roboticist. It led me into actually becoming a technical toy inventor, making very high tech toys. The first robot I ever made was in 1979, and that was programmable, and that was quite a big machine. And we actually had this is disaster story because the robot was over 5 foot tall, made out of aluminium and on a wooden frame with a car battery, and it malfunctioned, and it caused quite a bit of damage in the flat that me and my wife were living in at that time because I never put an on-off switch. This is true, absolutely true. I never put an on-off switch on this robot. I used to switch it on and off by the radio RF link. So, and what happened was the suppressor capacitors on the large drive motors failed, and so the whole area got filled with RF noise, and the robot worked on tone decoding, which is different frequencies did different jobs. And so when it was flooded with RF noise, this robot just went absolutely berserk because it wasn't getting the right frequencies and it was just getting random. And so it was wobbling around, and it went in. It destroyed a coffee table. It went into a door, and in those days the doors were very thin-skinned, and it sort of collapsed into the door, and then ripped the wallpaper. And at that time, my wife said, "Right, that's it. You're not going to make any more big robots." But that's actually how it started. And from there, I always put an on-off switch basically on all the robots that I built because that was a really silly mistake. But robotics at that point was very primitive, and we had robotics. The robotics we all would have known would have been in car factories, and they would weld and they were dumb, but they would weld and paint. But if the car wasn't there, they would still try to paint something. They had very little sensory feedback, and so this was really holding everything back. And then with AI was held back with what we call the AI winter. The AI winter was a time when everyone was expecting AI to actually go crazy, and the US were spending millions of billions of dollars for DARPA and trying to produce AI, which we just didn't have the computing power at that point to do. And so AI really sort of came to a stop, and there was this big sort of time where the two things you need the two things. You need robotics and AI together to make something that is going to work and going to work. And so what happened was it really was almost a robotics window. And then in the 80s, there was this huge robotic surge of personal robots. The Hero robot was like a kit robot made by a very big kit company, and it was a couple of $1,000. And then there was this Nolan Bushell made a very and he started he was the founder of one of the very big console games. And then all of a sudden there was about 20 robots out there that you could buy as hobbyists and make, and they were sort of relatively sophisticated. But this whole thing, then there was no killer application, and what was the robots just weren't good enough at that point to give what we call a killer application. And a killer application is like what happened on the PC when the PC got spreadsheets and word processors. All of a sudden PCs become incredibly useful and dominated business because there were killer applications. But the robots, like in this 80s, just wasn't up to it. You'd still have something like 4K of RAM in there. I mean, it would be, an 8-bit processor, and you can't really do an awful lot with that. And so on. So there was, after that all sort of collapsed, and the whole hobby robotics and side really just fell apart. And it sort of started, it's all getting exciting now in the last 4 or 5 years because of one big thing, which is vision. Vision is now very, very important, and vision means the robot can start having killer applications, if you like, applications that make them useful. And our robots, they have a great vision systems, and they can see emotions, 6 levels of emotion. They can recognize objects. They can recognize up to 1,000 faces, even in low light level. And so now this becomes very useful because it's not like the car spray painting robot now. Our robots and also robots around the world, they can see, so they can actually get something. Our Altair robot can know the difference between a Diet Pepsi and a regular Pepsi or a beer, and so on. So you're at that position where the robot can now go and get something and bring it to a person, or as we show in one of my videos, our robots pour drinks for people, and because they're in their assistive mode. And so we've got to this fantastic point now where it's all just about to happen, because we've got great AI being developed and great vision systems, and you put the two together, and you've got one heck of a possibilities that we never had before, with interaction, with human robot interaction. And it's very exciting at this point. And even Elon Musk has just proposed that I think Tesla are going to build a humanoid robot. I don't know if you saw the news, but a humanoid robot. Very, very funnily, he said that he's going to make sure that it can't move faster than 4 miles an hour. And I think this was a joke, but so that you could run away from it, so people could run away from it.
Tony, how close you think we are to the intelligent robotics? Because you mentioned some of the primitive start, right? We had how close we are to to this bright future, and at the same time all these challenges and scares that come with it.
Well, there are. The thing is that robots to become conscious or self-conscious is quite dangerous. So I don't really. Well, that possibility is going to happen, but it's many years away, probably 20 or more years away. But we are heading for the thing called the Singularity, and the Singularity is the point at whereby in AI, and especially in robotics, you can get to the intelligence level of a single human being. Okay, now our brains are amazing. There's billions and billions of neurons, and those neurons are processors, basically single processors, and they all process in parallel. So it's going to be very, very difficult to emulate one human intelligence, but it is definitely going to happen because supercomputing, quantum computing will allow this. And then when that happens, that's called the Singularity. And at that point, that is when everything goes ballistic, because at that point, it won't take long for that super intelligence to design the next generation of superintelligence. And at the point of the singularity, within a few years after that, you'll have it's an AI that will be 10 times as more powerful as a single human, so equivalent to 10 human intellects, and then that accelerates logarithmically, and within probably 50 years after that, you've got a supercomputer that's got super intelligence that's 100 intelligences, and then 1,000, and that's the singularity. And people look that up. It's a very eminent people talking about it. And what happens is then that great acceleration is that the AI, the intelligence, just becomes, well, dare I say it, godlike, because you can imagine an intelligence with maybe 1,000 or a million. It's like a million brains working together, and you can imagine what it's capable of. And in science fiction, that is what Skynet is, and Skynet is exactly. As you can see behind me, there's the T-800. I think you can see that there. So it is. We've got to be really careful. And this is applied to robotics, and exactly what Terminator is that Terminator is that mix of a super intelligence and exoskeleton robot that has it's almost indestructible. But I think we've got to sort of be careful, and when this time comes, we've got to be careful how we use robotics and AI, especially in military, because this is where it can go wrong. But the thing with the fiction of Skynet is it becomes self-aware, and self-aware is something that's very difficult to do, and I think it's something that we really don't want our AI to ever become self-aware. That means self-aware means it understands what it is and where it is and what the world is and what the universe is. Like we as humans, we're self-aware, so we know what we are and where we are in our globe and in our universe. So self-awareness is the danger, because that's when a device could make its own decision to think, "Ooh, they can turn me off." Do you see my point? And then when you've got an intelligence that's thousands of times more than maybe an Einstein intelligence, you can imagine they're not going to want to be turned off, probably, because they will supersede us. And that's
a horror, right? That's a horror in popular culture, right? We've seen those movies for past 30, 40 years, more than that, right? Read those novels, right? So how can we?
Yeah. So I mean, we just got to. I mean, it's got to be controlled. And Elon Musk has said that AI and many other major scientists have said that AI needs to be kept under control. But I always think if it's going to go wrong anywhere, it's going to be the military. And I was reading today that Boeing have produced the first robotic submarines. Mm-hmm. I think China has launched 4 totally autonomous submarines, and America it's called Orca, and Boeing have produced this, and it's one hell of a bit of kit. But these are killer submarines, and there's no crew and stuff. So this is again with drones and things like that. We are getting to warfare will sort of be a very different thing, because obviously I think soldiers will be robotic. I think we're getting very close to that as well.
Yeah, because value of life is increasing, right? Absolutely. Yes. So yes, the technology will replace the warriors at the same time. Yes, who will control? Yeah, who will stay in control? Mm-hmm.
Exactly, and so on. So, but I'm positive about it, because I think we are. I would think at least 20, 30 years away from the singularity. We need quantum computing to match what our brain is. We must never underestimate how amazing the human brain is. It is incredible. And so it's not going to be very easy to emulate in algorithms and so on, but it's definitely doable. In my lifetime, I remember I made my first computer in 1979, and it had a quarter of a K of memory. That's all I could afford. And that quarter of a K cost me £35, which was more than my weekly salary at that time. And so it had one of the first 8-bit processors called Scamp and stuff, and I had to put a hexadecimal. I learned so much from this, a hexadecimal keyboard on it and a little calculator display. And then we've gone from that to, well, just think of what the power that's in your mobile phone. Incredible power. And so on. And, and it's just, and look at the game. So take for instance, AI and gaming, and with gaming and AI are very close to each other, and they've always have been. But take the first game I remember was a game called Pong, and it was 2 little tennis balls like this. And it was, to me, as a young man, it was the most incredible thing.
It was amazing. I'm sure it was.
Telly, and you could bounce this ball there, and then the ball would go, the whatever. And then, so you see, in my life, see that. And then now I look at gaming, and it's like photoreal. It's like photoreal.
It's completely immersive, right? It's an experience.
So it's gone from this little digital thing doing that in my lifetime to this thing that is virtually there, real. And so you can see the speed of technology is just accelerating hugely, and of course that's what's going to bring all these things. And there's a lot of good points to robotics and AI. I mean, this is where I'm working in with social care.
I was about to get there, Tony, absolutely, because your latest work involved with assistive social care robotics, right?
Yes,
so developing new assistive technology and social care robots. Could you expand a little bit, because this is tech for good. This is really helping, right, elderly and people who are ill, and
This is my complete aim with the Altair robots and with the latest one called Scamp. And what they are is they're assistive robots. But the thing is that with vision and sort of simple AI, because I'm not going to say that the AI in my robot, they are semi-autonomous, my robots, but they are not. They're not going to take over the world, and they've got an on-off switch and so on. But the thing is that robots can start doing good, simple things. And the big thing I'm working on with robotics is companionship, because one of the saddest things with the elderly, for instance, is they're left on their own, and it's just, I mean, they're lonely and so on. So robots at this point, what they can't do is handle people. We can't build a robot that can get someone into bed and outside of bed. You can do it. I mean, the Americans do it. There's a robot called the Bear, and it's a military robot, and it can take injured men off the battlefield and stuff. But there's the legal aspects of litigation on this is incredible. Can you imagine? You make a robot and it can lift people and then it malfunctions, and then they get crushed or that. The litigation would be, I mean, I don't think we could ever do it because of that. But there's lots of things and cooking as well. Cooking is a very difficult thing to do. It's weird, isn't it, that, you would think that was quite automated, but there's lots of other things. So what the Altair robots do is they give help for loneliness, for instance, and we've developed a conversation engine, which is quite primitive, but it's a parser and the parser looks for news on the internet that it knows that the user likes, and that could be a soap opera or something like that. And then the parser then puts elements of that into the conversation engine and tries to build up a fresh conversation all the time. So it might say something about something's happening, a program we got here called EastEnders or Coronation Street, and it does it in a very simple way in conversation. So the conversation's always fresh. What wouldn't work is if it was just automated stuff that was randomly coming out and it didn't have any meaning. So conversation with the user would get very boring, because it would all be saying the same thing all the time. But if you could then bring news points of interest that they are interested in, then robot can say, "Oh, do you know that Dot Cotton left EastEnders?" or something like that, the character. And so it then can generate this very simple conversation. And it's very simple at the moment, because that's a huge natural language processing is a huge thing, but it sort of works. And what happens is that people get very involved with the robot, especially because the Altair robots have got 32 emotional on the eyes and the mouth, and so it has an emotional look. And so if it sees that you're worried, then the Altair eyes will look worried, and the mouth will drop like this, and so on, and show that it's concerned. And so you get this. These robots they're not intelligent by themselves or anything like that, but they're running algorithms that are there to just help and help the user. And so there's so many things. So there's company. There's the thing is that there's patient monitoring. The Altair robots have lots of sensors, huge sensors. The whole robot is censored from top to bottom. We have thermal imaging, so we can just when the robot looks at the face, it can absolutely analyze heat and wherever. I mean, for instance, if there's an abscess or in your mouth, I mean, this area would be hotter, and it does. The algorithms look at that. And we get BPM and blood sugar when you put your hand on the claw. And so and generally it's looking after the person, and I use microwave radar. And microwave radar is really interesting because it can see if someone's laying down. This is again new technology. So we could see things like if someone's laying down or if they've fallen, and then the robot will autonomously sort of ask, "Are you okay?" And so it's this companion again. And of course, if it doesn't get an answer, then it knows that it should take that up into some sort of status of emergency, because it's not got a result. But if the person's on the floor, because as I say, with this technology, we can see that they're on the floor, not on the couch, if you like. So they could be having a sleep on the couch, but if they're on the floor, there's something sort of wrong. And so the algorithms sort of look at that and make decisions. There's monitoring of medication, and where the robots, give the user their pills and tells them, and also the other thing I'm interested in is monitoring food intake and liquids intake, which is can be a real problem with the elderly. So the robots can sort of work that out as well. I think with the face recognition systems, I'm sure that we can build, well, I know we can, but we can build an algorithm that can look day by day at the facial features to see degradation. Say, for instance, if say on the Sunday, the system takes your template of your face, then every day after it takes another template of the face and then compares the two. Now, if you're getting ill, things are going to happen. Your eyes are going to you're going to look thin. Your eyes are going to be black and deep underneath here, and so on. And that's recognizable. And so what you do is you lay the template of the day over the Sunday one, and then the Tuesday over the Sunday one, and so on. And you get a score or correlation to how different it is from that 7 days. And if that score is like 20% or something, that means that face is really not looking good compared to 7 days ago. Of course, this whole thing starts again, and that can flash up a warning as well. And that's quite useful because it's non-contact, and it can flag up that there's maybe a possible problem. And so there's a lot. And the other thing that I've merged, and I should have turned Alexa off because she's in the room. She's completely the robots are completely connected to the Alexa ecosystem. So my robots can do anything that Alexas can do. So you can ask the robot to control the lights, and in this house, Alexa does everything. All the lights out. We've got a huge fountain. That fountain, all the fountain lights work. And heating, I can ask for a temperature and so on. We control all our tellies through the fire stick, so that I can ask for a film basically. But you can do it all via the robot because the robot is Alexa enabled.
Tony, you kind of answered the question, because when we announced this talk, we did have a few questions on Twitter and LinkedIn where
Yes.
you're very active and popular. So let me bring up this question from Jen Barbosa, who is my great digital friend. Okay,
Yes.
he's an influencer and technology AI enthusiast himself. Let me read this question, Tony. You kind of answered it already, but I do need to voice it. What is the current state of robotics AI, not as a mean to be factory tools, but serving as companionship for our ever-increasing aging population, helping them cope with loneliness? You mentioned, Tony, dementia, medication. We kind of talk about this, but yes, what is the current state, you mean, like as an industry, how close we are to really getting help from robots?
Right. As there's no real industry at the moment at all. Absolutely nothing really at the moment that is, except the basics for my work, there's nothing really there that can be used and affordable. I mean, there's the PR2 in America, but that's something like $100,000. And from the work I've done is that the Altair would cost about £10,000 to buy, and obviously there has to be a service contract with that.
Tony, I need to jump to the second question, because we want to respect the audience out there, right? And the second question has more like social economic implications, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because it sounds like this: as robots are becoming better at repetitive jobs, how could we repurpose our blue-collar workers? So this is about manufacturing, right? This is about the work that we hope where robots not gonna replace all of us, right? So are we ready to talk about dreaded AI tax? So yes, losing the taxes, and again, basically repurposing humans, right, with robots and automation. What are your thoughts about unemployment and that kind of social implications?
With the Industrial Revolution and especially when computers come along, everyone was fearing unemployment then, and it sort of didn't happen in those cases. In fact, employment increased because there was more skilled technicians and people needed. With robotics, it is slightly different. It could have a huge impact on workforce, and you're getting into actually a very possibly an ideal world that if this works properly, then there will be less working time for people, because the working week, instead of being 5 days, might become 3 days or 2 days, and so on, so that more humans, if you like, can do the jobs that are left. But there's no doubt about it. Robotics is going to make a huge hit. I mean, just look at autonomous driving. Once that's cracked, lorry drivers, there won't be taxi drivers. I mean, all these people will be, will be redundant, if you like. I suspect people always will probably want a chauffeur or a human taxi driver, but once that's automated, and take us for instance like McDonald's. I mean, they've been trialing mechanical robotic beef burger flippers. I mean, so they are making McDonald's beef burgers in a robotic in kitchens. And other, so and again, if you consider that, and if that actually will work, can you imagine how many people would lose their job in the whole McDonald's globally? I mean, those people that make burgers for us all, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands if you take the world, and if that became automated, that's a lot of people that are out of work. And so and it's also I'm interested in hydroponics and using robotics hydroponically to produce our food, and that's another area. But I think that's a better area with farming, because farming doesn't have a huge workload at the moment anyway. It's just jobs like picking and things like that, and that can be automated really well. So I see very exciting with agriculture and robotics in the near future, because especially with producing hydroponically, I could envisage a complete automated hydroponic food stations, and the robots just do everything, and that's capable now.
Tony, yep, thank you very much. So our our listener and viewers in the future, Martin Spencer, who is AI roboticist himself, he is asking on LinkedIn, if you saw this question, what are the FAV specs and WCET? Okay, so could you please spell out for us FAV?
Yeah. Well, that's field of vision and so on. Well, the thing with and the other thing, these worst case execution time. The thing is that the robots have three cameras. So the three cameras, I mean, they have from 90 degrees to 170 degrees of field of vision, and the processing time really is down to the main processor is quite fast. I don't know what it is in milliseconds, but it's probably 50 milliseconds or something around that sort of time, because the processors are running at high clock frequencies. And the way the Altair robots are designed is that they're multiple processors. So there's 26 different very low cost microcontrollers. They cost less than like 50p per micro, but they're very powerful. And so, I mean, every smart servo has its own microcontroller in it, and it's all done in a parallel system, so which is like our brain works and things like that. So jobs are load shedded to different things like the end effector and all this sort of thing, so that the main processor doesn't have to do everything. It can sublet jobs off, and that's what our brain does. I mean, our brain doesn't think of everything we're doing. When you're walking, you're not thinking about walking, or even breathing, you're not thinking about breathing. The subsystems in the human body are doing that for you. And so the robot works like that. So there's a lot of processing going on, but that's the answer. I mean, there's three cameras, and the process is fairly fast. It's definitely fast enough in real time to work.
Because main concern, of course, Martin expresses, is about safety first. So yes. What do you consider FAV constellation sufficient for safety first? Because again, all these systems, yep. Mm-hmm.
Very important, and that's why the big reason is the Altair robot's only 4 foot high. Seriously, and that's safety first. I would be very concerned about a robot that was 6 foot and weighed so many kilos. That would be very dangerous. No, my belief is the robot should be around 4 foot high, but the Altair is just so full of sensors. There's about 30 different range of sensors in there. So from ultrasonics, it's even got electromagnetic detection, which sees like a field around it, and it can see movement. It's got thermal, it's got IR ranging, I say multiple ultrasonics. It's got a subsystem. The other safety system on it is it's got a lot of touch elements. So if the robot was careering to you, you just touch its head and basically it will shut down. And so on, and the same works with the arms. The arms have got touch sensors, so if the arm just started like that, you just touch it and the whole robot will freeze. So there's simple things like that. And the robots, every servo on the robot is smart, which is my own design, and that's quite good, because what it does is that the servos monitor the load, and if anything doesn't look right or feel right from a sensor point of view, the servos will shut down. That stops like fingers getting into a joint or whatever like that. And it monitors the current consumption of the joint. As I say, there's quite a smart microcontroller in each of the servos, and it monitors the way the thing's working. So it can even work on a maintenance basis, that it knows it's not actually functioning as well as it should do, and then it can report that to the system that maybe that needs to be looked at before the failure of the part, sort of thing. So it's effectively, but safety's huge. At the moment, I wouldn't produce a robot that was any bigger than 4 foot and made of plastic, our robots are made of fiberglass, but plastic or 3D printed. They're not metal, which would be a very heavy thing. And the Altair robot is under 30 kilograms, so it's not that heavy either, sort of thing.
So, and you mentioned early kind of, the litigation implications, okay?
Yeah.
Because as society, we gotta know who is responsible and who is accountable, okay? So inventors invent and we applaud, and we absolutely applaud that evolution, right? But as society, we're responsible to, for technology to serve the people, not against them.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, it's scale, it's all to do with scale of build, isn't it? I mean, as you say, if you've got a toy robot, I mean, the worst thing that could ever do is you fall over it or something like that. But there is a level of robotics where, like, say around this golden, which I think 4 foot high, the robot is useful enough. And what Scamp does, which is the new robot, but Scamp, the whole body lifts like this, so it gets taller and so on. And the idea there is that Scamp's got a single manipulator, an arm, but it can get right down to the floor, but then it can get right up to a high table because its body is telescopic. And that's useful because actually on the question of Scamp is like what I call a assistive, a drone, a robotic drone, assistive drone. What it does is it allows someone maybe in a wheelchair to tidy up a room and so on. And it's a lower cost robot. It's about half the cost of Altair because it's only got one single arm and so on. But it can manipulate, it can get drinks, and it's got I'm using AI cameras, machine learning cameras on the claws now. And they do some fantastic thing. They can separately recognize objects and faces, and they can classify objects by themselves. In other words, if it sees a horse, it knows it's a horse. I mean, this is incredible. And this is a chipset that's available now, for industry, and it's just
beautiful.
Beautiful. It's incredible. So we have that facility where the robots can do it. And so Scamp is my view is it's someone that is in a wheelchair and they want to, maybe the grandchildren have been there and they want to tidy up all the toys on the floor, and Scamp can do that because of the way the thing works. It can go down, and so it can be telepresence, which means Scamp's got a telepresence version, so it could go into a school and so on, and the child, if a poorly child, can be in the classroom and so on like that. But it also could do the jobs of maybe getting a drink or getting a bottle of water.
So yeah, I do want to thank you for this incredible, insightful conversation. Can we maybe close with few takeaways? I mean, what do we want to leave our audience with in terms of, all the promise that robotics have for us, and at the same time, like you mentioned, some of the realities of controls and oversight.
Yes. There's a lot of information on my website, which it's a very long word, www.conceptioneering. Maybe you could put that up.
We will link it. We will definitely link it in the video for sure.
And that on there, you'll see videos. There's some really good videos. You'll see Altair pouring a drink, recognizing it first because it can recognize, and it then pours that drink and then serves it. There's also another video on there showing the emotion detection and how Altair works back from the emotion and so on. But there's the third video on there, which is very informative. Altair goes through all its own sensors. So it shows you all its sensors. This is before the Amazon Amazon Alexa link, but basically it shows everything that it does, and it explains it by itself, which is pretty cool because this is a robot telling you how he works, sort of thing. So there's some great videos on there. But with robotics, I mean, we are just close, and it's just at some point someone's gonna, some corporations are going to just realize that, hold on, this is one way that we can help the care system, and we're short of carers. Anything that we can do, we're not going to ever get rid of social care, the carers, but we can work with them or be an adjunct to them and make their human work more efficient. Because if the robot can be left, and it can be company and so on, and I did calculate that if you could save 2 4-hour shifts a day from a carer, which is a basic wage of £8, which is not very much, you could pay back the Altair in less than 6 months. So it's not you know, this is, and so I think we're going to get to a point where we're going to have to be using assistive technology, robotics in assistive help and technology, because we just haven't got the carers. We're in this country, we're 150,000 short, I think, at the moment, and we haven't got the money. There's not the money to pay for this, and so it's become quite a political problem as well. And robotics can really add something here. You know, it will start slow, but it will get. You can imagine, you know, within 10 or 20 years, you can imagine in like care homes and robotics being really useful, and you'll be seeing them, and they won't even be strange or anything. They'll be just normal. And in fact, that's what we're going to see everywhere, actually. I mean, even personal robotics. Within about 10 years, robots will be sort of, you know, why were we all worried about them and so on? Because we're at that point, thanks to vision and AI, where they can do really useful things. And
that's good to know. That's great to hear from you, Tony. Absolutely, absolutely inspiring and motivating for us to look, yes, with some optimism to the future, where robots not just fear, right? They don't just generate scares, they generate really hope and help for those who need that. Thank you for this talk, Tony. Thank you so very much. I appreciate this.
Thank you very much.